Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love, Crimes of Passion Series, Episode 9.
This is a tough one.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a case that really gripped India back in 2022, the story of Shraddha Walkar.
Right.
And it's a case that really makes you think about how love can twist into something really, really dark and dangerous.
Absolutely. And I think this case really kind of underscores that dark reality that sometimes lies beneath seemingly ordinary relationships,
Right.
It can happen anywhere to anyone.
Yeah. And Shraddha, she was a young woman,
Mm.
just 27 years old, from Vasai, Maharashtra.
Right.
And, everyone who knew her described her as just this bright, cheerful person, full of life, ambitious, and had so much to look forward to.
Yeah, she had her whole life ahead of her, it seems.
She did. She really did. She was working at a call center, and that's actually where she met Aaftab Poonawala in 2018.
Right.
And they fell in love pretty quickly by all accounts.
Yeah. And, I think it's important to note here that their relationship right from the get-go faced some hurdles.
Yeah.
Shraddha's family didn't approve of the relationship.
Right.
And a lot of it stemmed from religious differences.
Yeah.
This really added, a whole other layer of complexity and tension to their story.
It did. And despite, this disapproval, they decided to kind of take a chance and move to Delhi in 2022 to start this new chapter together.
Yeah, a fresh start.
Yeah, but that first start very quickly turned into a nightmare.
It did.
Because behind this image of, what seemed to be a happy couple things were really far from what they seemed.
Right, and as we later learned, their relationship was anything but a fairy tale.
Right.
Friends and acquaintances started describing their relationship as turbulent,
Yeah.
marked by constant fights and arguments.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of turmoil brewing beneath the surface.
A lot going on there that no one really knew about.
Yeah, and it's so hard to fathom how someone that you love can become a source of fear and pain.
Right.
But the reports suggest that Aaftab's behavior just became increasingly more sinister.
Yes.
He was reportedly very controlling, manipulative, and there were even allegations of physical abuse.
Yes, and this is a classic pattern we see in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
That gradual, tightening of control and isolation of the victim.
Right, and tragically, it seems like Shraddha, like many victims of abuse, she found herself trapped in this cycle.
Yeah.
She confided in a few friends and expressed hope that he would change.
Right.
But she remained in the relationship.
Right. Driven by love, by fear, maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And it's important to point out here, abuse is never a simple issue.
Right.
It's a complex web of emotional and psychological dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes even financial dependence.
Right.
The abuser will often use this mix of manipulation, threats, even moments of what seems like kindness to maintain control over the victim.
And as time went on, friends noticed a really stark change in Shraddha.
Yeah.
She became increasingly withdrawn, isolated herself from her social circle, lost contact with a lot of people who cared about her.
Right, and that's classic abuser tactic.
Yes.
To isolate their victims, make them completely dependent.
It's chilling to think about her, growing desperation, feeling trapped, and just with nowhere to turn.
Right, that isolation makes it so much harder for victims to seek help or to find support.
Right.
It can really have devastating consequences.
And in this case, the very place that should have been her sanctuary, their shared apartment in Delhi, became the backdrop for a horrific crime.
It just did.
Their already tense relationship just reached this breaking point with a series of really violent arguments. And then on May 18, 2022, during one of these confrontations, the unthinkable happened.
This is where the case takes a very dark turn. The argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Aaftab strangled Shraddha to death.
Yeah.
It was a brutal act that really sent shockwaves across the country.
And the brutality of the act is just shocking in itself.
It is.
But what's even more disturbing is what Aaftab did next.
Yes.
In this act of cold-blooded calculation, he dismembered Shraddha's body.
Yes, a horrifying detail that really speaks to the depths of this crime.
Yeah.
It does. And this is where we really start to see the premeditation and a complete lack of remorse.
Right.
In this case.
And over several days, he disposed of her remains. In different forested areas near their home, he went to great lengths to hide this crime.
He did, a gruesome thought.
It is.
But his deception didn't end there.
Right.
To further cover his tracks, he kept Shiraz's phone active.
Wow.
He was responding to messages, updating her social media.
Oh, my God.
Creating this illusion that she was still alive and well.
It's just unbelievable.
A cruel and calculated charade to mislead everyone and buy him time.
So for a significant amount of time, he managed to keep this horrific secret hidden.
He did. He did.
And it was only when Shraddha's family, understandably worried after not hearing from her for so long, reached out.
Right.
That the truth began to unravel.
That's right. That silence, the lack of communication, that was a major red flag.
Right.
That ultimately set the investigation in motion.
They filed a missing persons report.
Mm.
And that's when the police started digging into her disappearance.
Right.
And this marked the beginning of a really long and arduous process to uncover the truth behind what happened to Shraddha.
Yes. A long road ahead for the investigators at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had a lot of work to do to figure out what happened to her. The police, faced with this growing concern from Shraddha's family, they started their investigation.
Right.
They traced her last known location to Delhi.
Okay.
And began by, questioning people in her circle.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, included Aaftab.
Right. And initially he stuck to this fabricated story, claiming that Shraddha had just left after a fight.
Right, a common tactic.
Yeah.
To try and deflect suspicion.
Yeah, but as investigators dug deeper, his story just started to crumble.
Right, full of inconsistencies.
Yeah. And I guess experienced investigators can often pick up on those subtle cues.
You can.
That betray a fabricated story.
Absolutely. Inconsistencies in the timeline, their demeanor.
Right.
A lack of genuine concern.
Yeah.
Those are all red flags.
Yeah, it's like they could sense that something wasn't adding up.
Right.
They started to see those cracks in his narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of evidence to support his claims.
And they weren't just relying on his statements.
Right.
They were simultaneously working to uncover physical evidence.
Okay.
And that's where forensic findings from the apartment became crucial.
So what kind of forensic evidence did they find?
Well, I can't get into, the specifics of the case,
All right,
but
okay.
important to understand that forensic science plays such a vital role in these types of investigations. Things like DNA analysis, bloodstain pattern analysis, even the examination of digital footprints like phone records, internet history, all of that can help to corroborate or refute a suspect's story.
And those digital footprints are so important these days.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost impossible to completely cover your tracks.
You're right.
In the digital age.
It's like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs wherever you go.
And so in this case, that forensic evidence combined with the witness testimonies and those digital footprints you mentioned really started to paint a very different picture than the one that Aaftab was trying to present.
Yeah, the weight of the evidence was just too overwhelming to ignore at that point.
So faced with this mounting evidence and the relentless pressure from investigators, Aaftab finally confessed to the crime.
He did.
It must have been such a shocking moment for everyone.
It was. He admitted to murdering Shraddha in a fit of rage, confirming everyone's worst fears.
But as we know, the horror didn't end there.
No, it didn't.
Aaftab then went on to reveal the gruesome details
of
how he had disposed of her body. And this led investigators on this, grim search for her remains.
It did. It was a daunting task.
I can only imagine.
Trying to locate, human remains scattered across forested areas around a major city.
Yeah.
Battling against time, the elements, the possibility of animal scavenging.
Right.
Decomposition. It's a race against the clock.
Wow.
To recover any trace of the victim.
And they did recover some of her remains.
They did. It was a long and painstaking process.
Yeah.
But the investigators, driven by that desire for justice and to bring some closure to Shraddha's family, they persevered.
Right.
And the remains they found were crucial evidence.
Yeah.
But sadly, due to the passage of time and the elements, a complete picture remained out of reach.
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder that even with a confession, sometimes the full truth remains elusive.
It does. It does.
But the recovery of those remains really marked a turning point in the case.
It did.
The focus shifted from searching for a missing person to building a solid case against Aaftab.
Right, who is now a confessed killer.
And this case, as we know, really had a huge impact.
Yes.
Not just on those directly involved, but on the entire country.
Absolutely.
I mean, the story of Shraddha Walkar sent shockwaves through India.
It did. It did.
Exciting outrage, grief, and a demand for justice.
It became a national conversation.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't just a crime.
Yeah.
It was a tragedy that exposed a deeply troubling societal issue.
Right. The case became a symbol of the vulnerability of women in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And it really brought to light those systemic failures that allows such violence to continue.
It sparked a conversation about the very real pressures that prevent victims from coming forward. The stigma surrounding domestic violence.
Right.
And the often inadequate support systems for those who are trapped in these dangerous situations.
It was heartbreaking, but it also served as a wake-up call. You know, people took to the streets demanding justice for Shraddha, calling for stricter laws and better protection for women.
It was a collective cry for change.
It was.
And it also prompted experts to really delve into the psychological complexities of these types of relationships, analyzing the warning signs, the manipulative tactics used by abusers, and the often complicated reasons why victims find it so difficult to leave.
Exactly, and that education, that public awareness is so important.
It is.
You know, we need to be able to recognize those red flags and empower victims to seek help.
Right.
You know, the case also highlighted the importance of robust mental health support and more effective systems to protect those facing domestic violence.
Shraddha's story resonated with countless people.
It did.
Who had either experienced abuse themselves or knew someone who had done.
Yes.
It broke the silence surrounding this issue.
It did.
Prompting this much-needed national dialogue.
It also led to a renewed focus on the role of law enforcement. And the criminal justice system.
Right.
You know, people demanded accountability, urging authorities to implement tougher measures to prevent domestic violence.
Right.
And ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice.
Right. It was a call for swifter action, for more effective laws.
Absolutely.
And for a system that truly supports and protects victims.
Yes. A system that actually works.
Yes. And amidst all the outrage and the calls for action, we're also left with some very difficult questions.
We are.
Questions that, make us reflect on the events leading up to this tragedy.
Right.
And what, if anything, could have been done differently.
Those are the questions we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into this case, I think it's hard not to feel the weight of this one question that keeps coming up.
It really does.
Could Shraddha's death have been prevented?
Right.
It's a question that kind of haunts everyone who followed this tragedy. And it forces us to look back and wonder if there were missed opportunities to intervene.
And, we know that Shraddha confided in some of her close friends about the abuse.
Right.
She expressed her fear, talked about Aaftab's controlling behavior, even the violence.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, could those who knew, could they have done more to help her?
That's a question that plagues a lot of people who are close to victims of abuse. They feel a sense of guilt or helplessness, wondering if they could have stepped in more effectively.
So what can friends and family do in those situations?
Well, I think approaching these situations with sensitivity and understanding is key.
Okay.
Simply offering support, listening without judgment, and encouraging the victim to connect with professionals who can help.
Okay.
Those are all really valuable actions.
Right. And letting them know that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
And helping connect them with resources.
Yes.
Like domestic violence hotlines or support groups.
Right. There's help out there.
And another question that comes to mind is about the authorities.
Okay.
Did they respond appropriately when Shraddha's family first reported her missing? Initially it seems it was treated like any other missing person case.
Right.
But we know now that there were red flags there. Pointing to something far more sinister.
Right, and you raise a good point.
Yeah.
There's always room for improvement when it comes to recognizing those warning signs.
Right.
Of potential domestic violence cases.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the need for law enforcement to be more vigilant and respond to these cases with the urgency and sensitivity that they deserve.
Because early intervention is so crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Time is of the essence in these cases.
Yeah.
We need a system that really prioritizes the safety and well-being of potential victims.
Right.
And doesn't make assumptions based on initial appearances.
And, this case really sparked this much larger discussion in India.
Yes.
About the laws surrounding domestic violence.
Right.
And the support systems that are available for victims. There were calls for stricter laws, faster justice, better protection for those who are most vulnerable.
And I think the case became a catalyst for examining those systems more closely.
Right.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
But the key is to ensure those laws are effective.
Right.
In deterring abusers and providing meaningful protection for victims.
Right.
Law enforcement needs the resources and training to handle these cases effectively.
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, we need to create a society where victims feel empowered and safe to come forward and seek help without fear of judgment or reprisal.
Shraddha's story, though tragic, has served as a wake-up call.
It has.
It reminds us that domestic violence isn't a private matter.
No.
It's a societal issue.
Right.
That requires all of us to be more aware, more empathetic, and more proactive.
It's a call to action.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond just reacting to these tragedies and work towards preventing them.
Right. And we need to foster a culture of respect and equality.
Yes.
Starting from a young age.
Absolutely.
Education about healthy relationships and the warning signs of abuse is crucial.
We need to challenge those societal norms that condone or excuse violence, especially against women.
Yeah.
And we need to stand with the organizations that are working tirelessly to provide shelter, counseling, and legal aid to those who are suffering.
The case of Shraddha Walkar will forever be etched in our minds as a profound loss.
It will.
But it also serves as a turning point.
Yeah.
A moment where we can collectively choose to say no more.
Right.
We can choose to learn from this tragedy, to advocate for change, and build a future where love doesn't have to end in such a heartbreaking loss.
A future worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
A future where everyone has the right to live free from fear.
Thank you for joining us on this difficult but really important deep dive.
It was our pleasure.
And if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please remember you are not alone.
You're not. There are resources available.
There are. Reach out to a helpline, a trusted friend or family member, or a professional organization.
There is hope.
There is.
There is a path to safety and healing.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow CrimePod Casual for more stories that explore the complexities of human nature.
We'll see you next time.
Stay curious, stay safe, and as always, stay vigilant.